Good morning, boys and girls. Nice to see you from home. I have a great story for you guys today. Today's story comes from a boy named Johnny. Now, Johnny loved to play baseball. He loved it so much that he finally convinced his mom to let him join the local baseball team. He was having so much fun. All of his friends were on the team, and the coach, Mr. Johnson, was great. Johnny really liked Mr. Johnson. In fact, one day, Johnny was out shopping with his mom, and he spotted Mr. Johnson. He was about to go say hi, when suddenly he saw Mr. Johnson do something kind of weird. He saw Mr. Johnson walk up to a fruit stand, look at all the apples, pick one up, look at it, put it back. He looked some more, he picked up a new one, looked at it, and he nodded. And then he put it in his bag. And then he left. Johnny was so dumbfounded. He's like, what? What did I just see? Did Mr. Johnson just steal? This can't be happening. I must have so wrong. No, he had seen right. Mr. Johnson put the apple in his bag and walked away without paying. Johnny was so conflicted, he didn't know what to do. Eventually, he told his mom about it. He's like, Mom, I have something to tell you. You know, Mr. Johnson, my baseball coach, well, I saw him today in the market and he put an apple in his bag, but he didn't pay for it. Now this really surprised Johnny's mom. She was so surprised. Everybody knew Mr. Johnson was an uphold citizen who was such a nice guy. I mean, he coached the baseball team. So then she called up all the other moms in the baseball team. Like, oh, you know what Johnny told me? He said that he saw Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Johnson was caught stealing in the market. Yeah, no, Johnny told me. He saw it with his own eyes. And she hung up. And then the mom that she had called the other mom. Oh, did you hear about Mr. Johnson? Apparently he's been stealing from people. Oh, you can't trust these people now, can you? Oh, what has the world come to these days? Maybe we shouldn't let our kids go to baseball practice. Who knows what he might take? And soon enough, all the moms from the baseball team, or the kids were on the baseball team, they knew about Mr. Johnson's sticky fingers. And they pulled their kids from the baseball team. Now Johnny was so upset. He was like, man, I loved baseball. I loved playing on the baseball team. Why do we have to quit? And then Mr. Johnson was like, yeah, why did everybody quit? And Johnny was in the market with his mom again. And he saw Mr. Johnson by the same apple stand. So Johnny decided to go up to Mr. Johnson and to ask him why he did these things. And so he walked up to Mr. Johnson. Oh, hi, Johnny. How are you? Haven't seen you since your mom pulled you out of baseball. How you doing? Mr. Johnson, I have a question for you. Why did you... And then at that moment, Johnny was interrupted by Mr. Marcus, the owner of the apple stand. He came out and he said, hey, Mr. Johnson, how you doing? Are those apples good? I know you like my apples. That's why, yeah. I know you like them, so that's why we have a good credit balance, right? Johnny was like, what? A credit balance? What's that? Oh, hi, are you from Mr. Johnson's baseball team? Oh, yeah, Mr. Johnson, he loves my apples. I grow them out in my own orchards, and he loves them so much that he gives me money every week so he can just stop by, grab an apple, and go on his way. Because he's kind of busy sometimes, you know? What? Johnny couldn't believe this. Mr. Johnson had paid for those apples in advance. He hadn't stole anything. And so by this information, Johnny ran back to his mom and said, Mom, you won't believe this. Mr. Johnson didn't take anything. Turns out he paid for those apples already. What are you talking about? Yeah, apparently Mr. Johnson knows the guy who's owned the apple stand, and he pays for the apples beforehand. So he didn't steal anything. Oh my goodness. Johnny, I called all the moms and I told them that Mr. Johnson was a thief. And that's why they pulled everybody from the baseball team. Oh no! This was all Johnny's fault. He felt it was his fault. He was the one that told his mom. And now she told everyone else. And now everyone thought Mr. Johnson was a thief. But he wasn't. Oh, Mom, how can I ever make this up to Mr. Johnson? What can I do? Well, Johnny, the only thing you can do right now is go to him and apologize. And so Johnny got up his courage. He was like, okay, I feel guilty, but I have to apologize to Mr. Johnson. This is my fault. And so Johnny called up Mr. Johnson and said, hey, can we meet up? I have something I really need to tell you. Okay, I'll meet you at the baseball field where we used to have practice. And so they met, and Johnny admitted to being the one that told everybody that Mr. Johnson was a thief. Will you ever forgive me, please, Mr. Johnson? All right. One condition, though. I want you to meet me here tomorrow, same time, but I want you to bring a pillow. You know those fluffy ones with all feathers in it? I want you to bring it here, and then I'll forgive you. That's kind of a strange request, but okay. Johnny did that. The next day, he came back to the baseball field with a pillow, and he gave it to Mr. Johnson. And Mr. Johnson said, Johnny, I forgive you, but he ripped open the pillow and grabbed the feathers, and he threw them up into the air where the wind carried them away. Mr. Johnson, why'd you do that? You see, Johnny, see all those feathers going out? They're spreading pretty fast and pretty wide, right? Yeah, why'd you do that? Well, Johnny, and Mr. Johnson handed Johnny the pillowcase. I'll forgive you, but I want you to go and collect all those feathers and put them back inside the pillow. Mr. Johnson, that'll take forever. The feathers have gone everywhere. There's no way I can do that. And so Mr. Johnson looked at Johnny again and said, you know, those feathers are just like your words. You don't mean for them to spread out, but once they're out there, they're impossible to get back in. Your tongue is the most powerful muscle in your body, not because it can lift 5 pounds or hit a home run, but because of the words it spreads. And once you say something, you can never take it back. So Johnny, I'll forgive you, but I want you to keep that message in mind. And just how Johnny learned his lesson about to be careful about what he says, so should you, because it's true. The words you say can never be taken back, and you never know how far they might spread or who they might hurt. Thank you for listening to my children's story.